welcome to the podcast. With me today is Ebbo and Eebrozgi, the developers of ZeroRanger. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hello.
So my first question is, now that the game's finally finished and released, how are you two feeling?
Who's gonna start? Actually, let's just because we're gonna talk over each other if you don't decide this beforehand. So
Sure, yeah.
Ebbo, you go first.
Well, after the
Pressure's on,
release,
buddy.
After the release, both of us, I guess, both of us were kind of. There were very many mixed feelings, and the end result was just emptiness altogether.
Yeah, that was like the release day feeling. It was just like all the feelings at once, and nothing comes through because I personally stayed up for like 28 hours or something at that point.
Wow.
Maybe, I don't know, it's around there, more than one day.
I at least had some sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Were you just putting all the finishing touches on it kind of thing, or?
Yeah, and actually like more than finishing touches, like there was some songs still missing on the last day, and I was doing the credits sequence on like the very final days, and we cut close, but we made it.
Nice.
And like after the release day, I've been feeling just super relieved because
I bet
1 month and several months, but like the last month prior to release was just like kind of hell, but whatever, I chose this path.
Would you say it was just a massive crunch getting everything put together during that time?
Yeah.
Is that what it kind of was like?
Yeah.
Wow. So during that month, what was the number one thing on your mind that you're like, oh crap, I gotta get this finished?
A lot of things.
Oh, okay.
What were we making? Like the very final scenarios of the game, and like all the post-game content were getting pulled together, like half done, but like mostly done.
Oh, okay.
But like just putting the things into place, even if they're mostly done, to put them into that one whole game is pretty surprisingly big ordeal. Like to work out that it actually works together all right, and so we were lucky that the pacing was like pretty fine in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
During the last week, I was constantly doubting us that whether we're gonna make it at all, and if the game was going to be any good at all, because there were so many loose ends still looming over us.
Yeah, I pulled like three all-nighters during the last week.
Holy crap.
Actually 2 only. The last all-nighter was after the release, the first patch.
Oh yeah.
Kinda had used to doing that, so it was no biggie at that point.
So when you guys were putting together those finishing touches and putting all the post-game content in there, you mentioned there were some things on your end that were kind of hanging over your head as far as loose ends. What were some of those loose ends you guys were trying to tie up, besides what you mentioned before?
I think Ebbo was more conscious about those than I was.
Oh, okay.
Tell me.
Well, as you mentioned, lots of post-game stuff, and mostly about some details that I'm pretty sure that if they weren't there in the release, most of people wouldn't even notice. But at least to me, they felt like a world that they had to be there, or the game just wouldn't be what we would like to it be.
Same, my brother. And like, you didn't hear this here, but I think there's like at least 3 songs missing in the game currently. but people don't seem to mind. It still works. We're just using like placeholders well, I guess.
Yeah, like I've never noticed anything like that.
But I'm personally like, there should be 3 more songs. It's not ready yet, and that's why we haven't even released like the soundtrack yet.
Yeah, you gotta add those final songs, huh?
Yeah, and also do maybe some slight mixing on the existing tracks. I'm pretty sure people won't mind that there will be more.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Before you guys put this game out, what were you kind of anticipating the reception would be like? What were your thoughts just before you put it out?
To tell you the truth, I At least I really couldn't anticipate anything because I was just so nervous if everything would come together. And
Everything will come
thought
together.
yeah, and I thought it would be best not just think about the reception until the game is actually released.
Yeah, that sounds like a very smart mindset there.
Yeah, I also tried to not think about it too much, but I was also feeling pretty hopeful, if stressed because of the final crunch. But like our reception for the old builds have been like increasingly better during every release, so it was kind of hopeful. But I tried to not overthink it in the end.
I think that's a good way of thinking because there'll be times where when I'm editing the podcast and just before release, I'll doubt myself and be like, oh shit, I need to cut out what I said here. That sounded stupid. I need to cut out here, whatever. And then I'm like, no, just let it rock and see what people think. So
yeah, I appreciate
usually.
I mean, I appreciate like the natural way of approaching the podcast, like just release it as it is as far as possible,
Yeah.
Usually, as a creator, you are always overthinking stuff.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys have any moments of kind of like second guessing yourself just before release where you're thinking, oh crap, we need to just throw this out or we need to add this in really fast or anything like that?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Ebbo, you go first. Again.
Well, yeah, self-doubt was the name of the game, and I was constantly thinking if it was any worth to actually release the game at all, or whether we should delay it again or something like that. But I'm glad with this release date.
I was prepared to delay like till the last day, but we somehow made it.
You guys made it. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, huge congratulations, because I think it's safe to say,
thank you.
Among all the people in the shmup community I've talked to, and myself personally, we think this game is very special. It's an excellent game. There's a funny quote. There's a funny quote Plasmo wrote on the thread. He said, 10 out of 10 girlfriend material. So there you go.
She's taken.
So going back in time, I'm curious to learn more about the development of ZeroRanger, how the project came together.
So how the project came together is kind of like how we came together.
Mm-hmm.
The origin story is like, we're both hanging out on the Finnish Nintendo forums. Like, what do kids do hang out on the forums? They post stupid shit all the time. And
yes.
So there was this Eebrozgi Buppaso Usura guy who didn't post stupid shit. He actually posted like a shoot 'em up video game using the inside shmup memes of the community. And I was like very impressed with that game. He co-created it with some other dude, also sharing his name. And actually, do you want to put some input here, because it's actually your game, not mine?
Well, I didn't really do that much with that regards to that game. I did some shitty graphics and some design, but it was really just a very, very irregular pastime to us. So
yeah.
I didn't think about that game very highly, and that one didn't really go anywhere in the end.
But what did it lead to? Because I was somehow convinced that you knew like a lot of shmups, and I was somehow impressed with that game, and I was like, wow, that's really cool.
How this happened.
Yeah, I mean, me neither at this point, but maybe we should like dig it up from Wayback Machine or something, and maybe we shouldn't actually. Anyway, the way that we eventually met is like also really stupid but kind of cute, because I on the same post where I was like, wow, that's a really cute game. I mean, cool game, not cute. I wrote in like a little text like, I wanted to create a game with Eebrozgi Buppaso Usura 2. And then this madman actually approached me like, let's make a game.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
I don't know why your self-defense mechanism didn't kick in. Like, this is a weirdo. Do not engage. But he came he came to me with the concept for a game where the fighter wants to become the final boss.
Yeah,
that's really cool. And looking on the forums, I noticed that you guys posted a thread about ZeroRanger, or his final boss, I guess is what it was known as initially, back in November 27th, 2009. So that is 9 years ago now.
Let me just look at the timestamp on the original concept art piece if I can find it real quick. But I can tell you it's early 2008.
Wow.
So it's really more than 10 years. There it is. Modified 11th of February 2008. That's when it started, I guess.
Wow, that's amazing. So that means this game has been in development for like a decade then.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
And while it has like changed a lot during the development, I'm pretty amazed that like it's practically the same game maker file all the way through. The foundation is there, has been there all the time.
Yeah, and even the sprites that I drew in like 15 minutes, they are pretty much the same.
Yeah, actually the ship sprite like somehow survived all the sprite overhauls.
Really?
Yeah.
Both ships?
No, like
or a particular ship?
actually both ships, but like the player one ship that is like existent in the first while. Only one pixel has been added and like a better thruster flame.
Yeah, along with a billion new animation frames and stuff like that.
Yeah, like 20 frames from ship spinning and like all dedicated sprites for when you have more weapons and the ship still spins and so on.
Yeah, I'm sure it ended up having a massive sprite sheet for that ship with all the different things it's able to do.
Yeah, I guess. Our texture pages aren't quite organized, but I'm actually pretty curious how big that will turn out to be. I'm gonna check this out later.
So initially the game, as I understand, was called Final Boss.
Mm-hmm.
What inspired the name change to ZeroRanger?
It was kind of less inspired and what forced. Because Googling Final Boss is an unpleasant experience for all parties involved.
I bet.
Yeah. And especially for me, because I am like the most spoiler conscious person about games I know of. And when my own game is called Final Boss, there's something very wrong going on.
I see.
Yeah.
You wanted a name that was a little more, I guess, ambiguous or a little easier to find? That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely not ambiguous like right now because like our first try to remedy this shit Googleability was like add a subtitle, and it was raw label.
Okay.
That was the first subtitle that was like in the title screen, so that helped kind of a bit. But because raw label was basically a fine way of saying that this game is not finished yet, that couldn't fly for the full version, so it became Final Boss like compound word, no space.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't want to remove the space from there, and L is a pretty unfortunate letter because it still looks like it has a space, so the Final Boss compound word didn't catch on like we wished it to.
Oh, I see.
So it was back to the drawing board like this year.
Yeah, and it took us like 3 weeks until we decided on the new name.
I'm thinking like only 3 weeks because it felt
okay, maybe
longer.
Emphasis on the felt.
Yeah,
because it was quite an arduous process for us, and it's kind of funny that we had so many different ideas and what the name should be, and
yeah, we were pretty hot on like
concepts.
Yeah, we were pretty hot on Star Eraser, and like everyone native speaking English person we asked, they were like, that's kind of a shitty name. And eventually we gave in.
Were there some other names as well that were kind of on the drawing board but got cut pretty late on?
What were those?
I can't remember on the spot, but there were quite a few.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like recycling the themes of the game. And anyway, what Ebbo ended up choosing as the final name is like, I really like it. It's very good. And
yes.
Would you like to tell
Excellent
where you got
name.
that inspiration to finally lock on to that name?
Can you remind me a bit? I don't even remember. Oh yeah. I think thanks to Eebrozgi's suggestion, I started watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, very late
okay.
in the development, and at some point when they introduced those stands in the anime, and the way they were named, it was just so on to the point, I should say, and then it sort of made me realize that what's the one thing in this game that actually means something, and then it just came to me because the name is actually used already in the game, and it felt pretty obvious in hindsight.
And kind of ironically, it was the only thing that is referred to like in the same font as the logo. So you know,
oh yeah,
that was a sign too.
It was looking at us.
Yeah, it's kind of a title drop right now, but old logo font set because we ran out of time.
No one would know. It looks, without any kind of background knowledge, you'd assume that ZeroRanger could have been the name of the project from the very beginning. It feels very natural.
Yeah, it's a very good name. Thanks, Ebbo.
I'm glad it ultimately worked out. Although those 3+ weeks were kind of a hell for us, an existential nightmare.
Yeah,
to put it lightly.
I was like thankfully able to just continue coding, but like you were mostly done with all the assets, so it was like the pressure was fully on you at that point. Can you please rename this 10-year project? Thanks. See you soon.
You mentioned that you are still using some of the same foundation from the first GameMaker file. So what were the early days of working on ZeroRanger like?
Innocent.
It certainly wasn't as, what's the word?
Serious.
Intensive. Yeah, serious or intensive. We just worked on it whenever we felt like it, and there was absolutely no planning about anything.
I was like starting high school, and it was like it still shows through in kind of a way like that is more natural, but it was like literally just like a fan project with mashes up all the elements from the Shmups we like unapologetically, but to the point that we like actually used music from other games. So I did remix that music, but we used compositions from other games. That doesn't fly today anymore.
Yeah, so it's really interesting here that it goes that far back in your personal lives too. You said you were starting high school. That's amazing to think about someone's project from early high school days making it this far.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder why I never stopped. Any sensible person will have done that. But I like working on it, so I guess that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, often these kinds of fan projects die out in the long run, but somehow we kept it going despite there were lots of hiatus and breaks during development at the early stage.
Yeah, like when you were going to your army service, wasn't it like you were sure this is the end?
Yeah, I was pretty much sure that this is done.
That's it. When you returned, it was actually running.
Yeah, and it was actually better than when I started my service.
Yeah, I guess that's what one-way road. Also, the another like goalpost when we were getting like much more serious about this game is that like we initially also like full-on used music from VG Music and all that. I didn't even compose, but at some point I was like, hey, I would like to try maybe composing for this game. Let's see how it goes.
And I was like, why didn't you tell me this sooner?
But I didn't know. I had like barely composed before that. Maybe I had done something, but I didn't have much self-respect on that regard.
sounds like you two handled the entire aspects of the game then, is that right? From, the music to the visuals to the programming. Was it all you two, or were there any outside help?
Like 90% or 95%.
Okay.
Some little things were like commissioned and helped with.
Mm-hmm.
Most notably, the character designer is neither of us.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Like the bosses and the ships and the enemy sprites and everything like that?
Yeah, those are us.
Oh, okay.
I mean, when you say sprites, they're like 99% Ebbo in that case.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you guys were mentioning that there were times where you pretty much figured the project might be over probably because of doing different things in your personal lives and things like that, but what was the reason you guys kept working on it or kept coming back to it?
If only we knew.
I don't know, man. I was not prepared to answer that question.
Hard-hitting questions.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
funny.
losing sleep tonight.
I guess one part of it was that because there was two of us working on this game, and
oh yeah, that's exactly.
neither of us wanted to let the other one down. So it really helped with the battling spirit, so to speak.
Yeah, also, and when you have someone to respond to, like someone to actually rubber ball ideas with, what's that? Rubber ducking. I don't know, what's the term?
Spitballing,
yeah. Anyway, when you have two people, like when you are directly exciting someone else than yourself, then it's much easier, like, to make things. You don't like have to literally create it inside your own head, because I can't imagine doing this thing for that long and also enjoying it alone.
It's also just thinking of, you guys were mentioning earlier, like doubting yourself or losing motivation to work on it. I could see how that could happen if it was just one person trying to make a game like this over such a long period of time. I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
They would lose motivation, or they'd start doubting it and be like, this isn't good or whatever. So.
Yep.
So it sounds like the team, having a partner and like a team, was a big factor in getting this game completed.
Yeah, I'm definitely recommending like teamwork. If you can find a good partner, please, if you're thinking about game deving, scout out a good partner, because working alone is not something I could honestly recommend to anyone, unless you have like good resources to like commission all the stuff and share the work. And if it's a short project, then yes, but if it's turning out to be a long project, then you're just going to go mad.
I could see that happening.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I wanted to learn more about the more technical side of things. You mentioned you started off with Game Maker, and over 10 years, I'm sure Game Maker has changed massively as well. So what was the process like did you have to do a lot of updating along with Game Maker?
Yeah, I think we changed versions 3 times. We jumped from Game Maker 6 to Game Maker 8 when I bought it, because Game Maker 8 was a rad piece of software. And then Yo-Yo Games, but they just abandoned it and left it broken. And then they introduced some baffling DRM themes with Game Maker Studio 1. So I was like, I'm not going to use this software as long as I live.
Interesting.
Or as long as possible, because, like, let me just give a disclaimer. This is long in past, and Yo-Yo has long time ago removed this decision. But at some point, they had a DRM scheme that when the Game Maker Studio 1 noticed that it might have been a pirated version, it replaced your assets with skulls, like irreversibly. And would you guess if that backfired?
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, I mean,
did that ever happen to you guys?
No, we didn't use Game Maker Studio, and we like stayed out of Game Maker Studio for a long time because of that. Even though it was in the end the much better tool to make the game in. But like, I was like disgusted at that notion, because when I think about piracy, I must like remember the poor kids who literally can't afford the program, like myself was when I was like living in the woods of Finland. Like, it's not that I could not afford the license of Game Maker, but whatever money I use, like my parents will be the ones who decide what I actually do, and they have like no idea what the hell is a video game. So what could I do?
Yeah. Also just thinking about that's risky even if you're using legit software, because let's say there's some kind of weird bug or weird glitch and all of a sudden GameMaker decides to destroy all your assets for
and
no
that's
reason.
exactly what happened, and people are furious.
Uh-huh.
Like, yeah, I didn't like the mindset.
I don't have. Yeah, I agree that the mindset about that everyone that uses this program must be a pirate or something. That's a bad starting point.
Yeah, piracy doesn't equal evil. Like, I get it's bad for business, but come on. Anyway, fast forward. Well, yeah.
Are you guys on GameMaker?
Yep.
On this version?
Yeah, like 2015. Like this thing happened back in 2012 or 11 or whatever. But in 2015, there was a Humble Bundle that was selling GameMaker Studio Professional license with all kinds of export modules for $1. So at that point, I was like, okay, I forgive you. I need this software because it's a good software. And during like late 2015, we published the raw labor Tate version. How do you pronounce Tate when you flip the screen?
You got it. Yep, you nailed it.
Tate, okay. And
yes,
early 2016, I started porting the game into GameMaker Studio from GameMaker 8, and that was pure hell.
I could imagine.
Yeah, it was like I had used like not good programming choices, like do not use if a variable exists. Always define the variable before you use it.
Yes.
That's like super bad habit that beat me back. And when I like first compiled the game and there was like massive amounts of errors, like 300 or something compile errors.
Holy smokes.
So when I finally weeded all through that, I got a new batch of compile errors. That was, if I remember correctly, something like 1407.
Whoa.
And like,
wow.
We both were not like sure if we should just cry or laugh, so we chose to laugh.
I can kind of feel your pain. I have a little bit of experience using GameMaker, and I've worked on just an unfinished shmup, kind of similar to, I guess, if ZeroRanger never got finished, in an early version of GameMaker, and then the new version came out, and I tried to port it over, and I basically just had to recode the whole thing, because, I was just getting hit with all these errors, one after another. I was like,
so
I can't ever get this off the ground.
you move it to GameMaker Studio 1, I guess?
I can't remember. The versions are a little, because they're both old versions. I don't have the recent version.
Yeah.
But it was one of the original versions to one of the later updates. But I can't remember which versions it was.
Pretty sure it was Studio, because Studio was, for a good reason, hard to port to, because the changes that Studio made was like in favor of performance, which I can understand. Like, why can't you do like if variable exists, because it's just like very bad practice.
Yeah, I think that's what was going on, actually. So that's funny you mentioned
also, that 1400 compile errors was actually way easier to fix than it sounded like, but like the initial despair was hard.
I bet.
It was like only a few scripts that were repeated, and I fixed those scripts, and it was all okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Moving to specifics about ZeroRanger, you mentioned that in its early days, and even now, it's kind of just like a mashing together of all these awesome different elements from all these different shmups. So it sounds like this was an idea from the beginning then.
I wonder. I wonder if it was the idea from the very, very beginning, but it was like the very, very early idea that happened.
I think that the first idea was just to make a game like Gust, shoot them up by Pixel.
Oh yeah.
The guy who created Cave Story.
Yeah.
So ZeroRanger exists thanks to Gust.
Pretty
nice.
Much.
I haven't played Cave Story in a long time, but I'm I'm familiar with, it's a really, really beloved game, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would say like one of my all-time favorites, personally.
And if you take a look at the Gust game, you can definitely tell where ZeroRanger got its inspiration for limited color use.
Oh, okay.
Because that game is mostly just blues and whites.
That's something I was going to talk about. Was one thing that really stands out about ZeroRanger is the use of color, where, there's a lot of that orange and kind of darkish blue. It's hard for me to identify the blue color exactly, but yeah, it has a really unified color to it.
Yeah, like
that I think works really well.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that turned out so well because, as I mentioned earlier, I drew the initial sprites in about 15 minutes or so, and I just picked.
And that was the palette.
Yeah, that was just the palette. There was not much consideration used, although we have tweaked that palette just a little bit to make it somewhat more readable over the years.
Yeah.
But the basic color choices are still the same, and some colors are pretty much just the same as they were in the beginning.
Yeah, the second lightest orange is the exact same color, and naturally black and white are still the same black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing to thank for Game Maker Studio 1. It introduced shaders that easily let us change the color in post-processing. So
that's nice.
We didn't have to go through all the assets and realize we want this green to be a bit more blue. I would have not wanted for that to happen.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a massive effort. And then you do all that, and then you change your mind, and then you have to go back through and do it again.
Yeah.
Wow.
I imagined that before shaders several times, that we just gotta improve this palette at some point, but it's gotta be a hell lot of work. It's ahead of us, and then shaders came around, and I was like, thank God.
So when you guys were putting together all these different styles of shmups and different styles of gameplay, what were your, I guess, main focuses? What were your main goals of designing the different styles of gameplay and getting them to work together?
Ebbo, you go ahead, because I think you're more responsible of the overall planning of this game. I'm just tossing shit together.
Funny that you say that, because from my perspective, it's usually during the development, I just came up with some idea, or I played some shmup and noticed something cool about it, and then I started brainstorming, and then I would tell Ebbo about this idea that I had, and you would just take the idea and then implement into the game.
Yep, no questions asked.
What was that process like for you when you were given the idea? Let's say, for instance, what shmups can you think of that when you were playing them, you're like, oh, this needs to be in ZeroRanger?
Eschatos.
Yeah.
Eschatos is a huge inspiration.
Okay, awesome.
After the second version that was in 2012, and for the version that is... No, actually... Oh, Eschatos came out in 2011, yeah. The influences can already be seen in the 2012 version, but the pure energy and the feeling of adventure that comes through from Eschatos is at least to me, a big influence.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first shmup in a long time that made me feel like a child again.
That's awesome. And Eschatos sounds like a more recent shmup, too. You said released in 2011, so that's really cool.
Yeah, but there are, of course, several games that inspired us. One is, of course, Gust, and other is Chor and Shah, I would believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for Ebbo, a big influencer would be Ikaruga.
Yeah, Ikaruga was pretty much the game that got me into this genre of games in the first place. And I think that it shows in many ways in the design, overall design of the game, even if I or Ebro didn't really think about it too much, but it has found its way into the final game in many ways. I
could see that.
Like in Ikaruga, pretty much every enemy pattern is completely distinct from one another. There is really no repetition between them, and that's something that is also what we aiming for in this game, that there would be no
repetition of enemy patterns, you think? And I'm thinking were we aiming for that? Just kind of happened. You guided my hand there.
That definitely comes across in the gameplay, because when I'm playing ZeroRanger, it feels like each stage has a very unique identity. They do not mash together. Where some shmups you play stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, and you can't remember what happened in stage 1 or stage 3. They all seem pretty similar. In ZeroRanger, each stage and, like you said, enemy is very distinctive, and you can immediately recall the differences between them.
Nice.
When I was playing, I noticed there's some things that really reminded me of Ikaruga. Like, there's a part where two trains, like in Ikaruga stage, I think it's stage 1 of Ikaruga, where there's those two trains you have to defeat on the railing.
Yeah.
And then in the stage 2 of ZeroRanger, the part with the boxes and stuff, that's kind of like stage 2 of Ikaruga.
Yeah, like that's straight lifted from Ikaruga, I think, from the early stages.
Uh-huh. Are there some other things, maybe some other games too, that had a huge impact on the way you guys designed ZeroRanger's gameplay?
I guess Radiant Silvergun.
Oh, yeah.
Like the
I would also like to give a shout out to lesser known gem of a game called Flame Chapter Gotsuin.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I think it's a PC 98 dojin game.
Yeah, it's super good, but it's also super obscure. I don't know how you will stumble upon it like normally, but it existed and it has like very high production values. And if I remember correctly, it's from like a company that mostly did clones from other games. Still very good.
I think they made a very, very solid Gradius clone as well.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool to hear about. I think it's definitely interesting to try and track that down and check it out. I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, like about Eschatos, it was like a game that made me feel like a real child again. Flame Chapter Gotsuin was another game that was like instantly, wow!
Yeah.
Excited about explosions. Legitimately.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Also, great soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, 2 soundtracks in one, kind of.
Oh, how is that?
Well, it has mono and stereo version of the soundtrack, which is like what the title says, but some of the songs are entirely different and all of them are good pretty much.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's weird, but it exists.
It's like a secret hidden arranged soundtrack or something.
Yeah.
So with ZeroRanger's gameplay, you mentioned your guys' influences. How did you end up deciding on the 3-weapon system that is in ZeroRanger?
Ebbo.
By trial and error, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
At the beginning, we just tried copying Gak's weapon style. In that game, you can collect several weapons during stages. And I just thought it would be kind of cool if you got new weapons after each boss, and then Brain Cell hit one another and said, but what about if you got 2 weapons instead of 1? That would be cool also. And
yeah, actually, I remember that specific moment when I was like, what if you got 2 weapons? And then we were both like, whoa. What is?
That's far out.
Nobody has done this before, and then Genetos came out. But that's a good game too.
It's an interesting decision because you can't collect both. You have to choose one or the other, and that affects, how you're going to play the later stages down the line.
Yeah, in the hindsight, it pretty much became one of the things that really defines this game. Even though we didn't really think much of it during development at all, we just thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting how that works out.
Like at the point of the demo during this year, like what was it, March or April 2018, when some people that knew about game dev more than we did were like, you gotta push out the demo if you want to sell this game, and we were like, jeez, I guess we gotta. And like at that point we like clearly knew that this was one of the edges of the game. So we made like a very short vertical slice of the game where you do get the power-ups to make the point that this is happening in the game.
Well, I think that's definitely a good idea, showing that off in the demo.
Yeah. I mean, if ZeroRanger would have been like just one of the stages, I mean, the ZeroRanger demo would have been just one of the stages, it would be like disastrously misleading. So it had to be like a collection of stages.
With your guys' weapon system, I've noticed, unless I'm missing something, there's not really a kind of typical concentrated shot or bomb mechanic. Was that something you guys were intentionally trying to leave out, or is it just kind of a coincidence?
Happened. Just happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess that neither of us were. I think both of us had played some cave games during development, but for some reason, neither of us really took too much inspiration from the gameplay systems in those games.
Yeah. Also, when people started first asking, like, please add bombs, it was like way too late because we had already added in the fourth weapon to like. There's just no space for a bomb button, and like the stages are already pretty much done, and they are not designed for the bomb. So it kind of just happened and worked out, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool, I guess, way of approaching things because, like you're saying, it feels different. It definitely feels distinctive. You know, you don't feel like you're playing a cave-style game. Definitely gives the game its own kind of feel.
And yeah, some people are not very fond of not having bombs, but sorry, can't really put them in at this point.
That's funny.
Yeah. Also, I kind of like the different flavor that comes from not being able to like escape from the bullet pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Throw in all seriousness, there are still tools for like defending yourself, like some of the charges and the melee weapons.
Yeah. And speaking of melee weapons, I definitely want to talk more about the Ranger transformation. Or, you know, you turn into you get the sword and everything. Where'd you guys come up with that idea?
I think it started with me telling Ebbo, like, this game needs a sword because I love melee weapons in like projectile-oriented games. Like having that like powerful melee show-off element is just something I love, and specifically beams sabers. Thanks, Mega Man Zero.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, Ebbo, we need this in the game, and he drew a robot, and I was like, oh.
Yeah. At first, I was toying around with a sword similar to Radiant Silvergun, where the sword would just move around the ship. But at some point, I just realized this doesn't look right. Maybe I should try something else. And before I knew that, I had drawn a robot, and I was like, "Oh God, I need to animate this thing as well."
Also, I have actually never heard about this story because it was my turn to be in the army service at that point, and like we were in very little contact at that time, and just someday you just dropped a robot on me, and I was delighted.
Was the initial design of the robot very similar to the one that's in the final version?
Yeah,
I think identical.
That's cool.
That's just the way we roll.
Yeah.
Well, that's really impressive. And thinking of the robot transformation from a gameplay perspective, I myself I've had the same feeling where I've wanted some kind of melee weapon in a lot of shmups, but I've been trying to figure out how do you incorporate that into a shmup, because most of the time your fire is just going to be way better anyway. But I really like the way you guys came about making it kind of more of a defensive option as well, where you can slow down bullets with the saber and stuff, kind of like Gwenge. I don't know if that was an inspiration at all, but
it was kind of a fortunate accident actually, because I wanted something like some special powers for the melee, like just reflecting bullets. Or it started as just simply, the big sword slash wipes out bullets. And then it was kind of hard to convey when the sword slash is big and actually defensive. So like initially the bullets will like just rudely go through your small sword. And it was not very intuitive. So I was like, maybe if the bullets like slowed down to show you that no, these are not going back. And then it kind of evolved from that into the system that is today.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really fun, the different things you can do with the melee transformation and slowing down the bullets. I don't know, it gives the game a really, like you said, it makes the game feel really alive and really exciting, rather than just always retreating and shooting stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. Like, we didn't plan it like that well. We just wanted some toys to play with.
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that it doesn't sound like Cave was a huge inspiration or a huge source of inspiration for you guys. You guys were more thinking of the, Ikaruga, Radiant Silvergun, those style of shmups. What I wanted to talk to you about is when you're considering all the different subgenres of ZeroRanger that, you guys would be incorporating, what were the ones that you guys definitely wanted to represent the most?
Well, the one that was definitely conscious was like non-Danmaku, because when we started out, even then we were like both thinking that this genre is kind of becoming pretty saturated with all the new games that are coming out are Danmakus.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like something we deliberately went against. Less bullets and more something else.
Yeah, besides that, at the beginning we really didn't have that much of a good idea what kind of gameplay style we were aiming for, whether it would be a more old school arcade style. But I think that when Eschatos released and we played it, then it showed us that, hey, you can actually make a game that isn't just a bullet hell or old school arcade style of game. It can be something distinct as well.
It can be all of them at once.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And when I'm trying to think of how I would describe ZeroRanger's gameplay, I would kind of say that about it. It's all of them all at once, just like you said. It's not anything. It's not easy to categorize by any means.
That's pretty interesting to me, because I can't be the one to sing the praises for our game, but that's definitely something I would say about Eschatos, that it's like very successful mashup of shmup subgenres.
Mm-hmm. And for you guys, you mentioned Eschatos. What are your guys' favorite shmups?
Ebbo first.
Well, Ikaruga is a given, and Flamesapper Kochuin, as I mentioned earlier. What else? Well, there are the usual suspects such as Dodonpachi and Patlegareka, which, of course, purely by visual standards are stunning games. Of course, as a graphic designer, I'm trying to take a lot of cues from them, how to do things. I'm trying to think something lesser known games, but those, at least for me.
Yeah, I think pretty much the same. Eschatos is definitely like a big breakthrough for me, and Gust was the one that started it all. And one of my favorites alongside Eschatos is Choren Shah 68K.
Mm-hmm.
It's absurdly good for how free it is.
Yeah, I think that Chorensa sits very not. It's pretty much in the same category as Eschatos, that it doesn't feel purely Danmaku or purely old school.
Yeah, and what I like about Eschatos is how aggressive it feels. Like, first you feel intimidated and then you die. it like telegraphs your fucked feeling pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to like incorporate, like the feeling of intimidation before you're actually facing the danger in ZeroRanger.
Yeah, there's definitely times like that in the game where there's just a few moments before the enemy's attack or before you fight this pattern, and you can just see what's ahead of you and you're like, damn.
Oh boy.
Here we go.
But it makes the game really exciting and kind of adds, I don't know how to say it, like a more cinematic style or there's more to it than just attacking and dodging. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
A cinematic experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Deep story-driven experience.
So when I was asking members of the Discord, I guess, because a lot of them are talking about all the different references to other shmups and stuff, they pointed out some ones that you guys have already mentioned, such as Eschatos, Espgaluda, Chorenshaw, and all these different shmups. But then someone's mentioned that there's also an Undertale reference in ZeroRanger, with the skeleton boss. So I wanted to learn more about, I guess, was Undertale an inspiration to you guys at all, or how was that for you guys?
Yep. Who starts? I start.
I think you should start this one.
Yeah, I guess I should start this one. So, as ZeroRanger formed, and it has already become irreversible reference fest. Or should I say festival? That sounds more fun.
Festival.
Yay!
Yeah.
All right. So then Undertale came around and like rocked my world. I was like devastated by that game because I just like it. Only the structure of the game was like so enticing to me, and it became like straight away one of my all-time favorites. And also I'm a sucker for good music, so it was like when the game already has like shmuppy elements, it was like, how can we not do a tribute to this game alongside these other games? So it found its way in.
Yeah, definitely. And just playing ZeroRanger, I feel like, I don't know, something about it reminds me a lot of Undertale. Even outside the tributes. Something about it definitely reminds me of Undertale.
And
I get the same feeling.
That's like way more coincidental, I think, because a lot of the game's tone was like set in stone before Undertale came out. And I'm interested in hearing more about that from Ebbo himself.
I would agree that Undertale certainly affected me as well when I first played it, and I was thinking it was strange seeing a game being so successful, and despite having gameplay elements that many people would think are outdated or no good in a sense.
Bad game design.
Yeah. But lots of similarities I also think are coincidental, that they just happened to have similar ideas. I guess that's a given because the game was being made for so long that eventually another game would come and have somewhat similar ideas. Well.
It's like both coincidental but intentional, but maybe not in the ways people would think. It's half coincidental.
Yeah, it feels like there's some underlying thing between the two that's similar, where Undertale's kind of a tribute to all these different RPGs, and
there's that
you're
too.
bringing them together in like this big amalgamation that's really awesome and has kind of a personality. And I feel like ZeroRanger is very like that with Shmups, where it's bringing together all these different elements and it kind of has its own personality that's definitely stands out.
Yeah.
So yeah, something to me, there's some serious similarities between the two.
Once we really started to integrate different references into the game, my hidden goal always was that if a person who would normally wouldn't play shoot 'em ups, that maybe once he played this game, he would go out and search for other games, and after that, once he played all the classics, he would notice different references to other games as well.
Well, yeah, because I feel like you definitely achieved that goal, because when I was playing ZeroRanger, I was thinking for the first time in a long time, this is a shmup I could recommend to my friends who don't play shmups. Then they would actually play it.
Thank you.
Like accessibility was like my big goal in the final stretch, like in the last about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in the last few years, our mindset shifted slightly, because we started to think more about the basic conceptions of the shoot 'em ups and how beginners would think about them. Such as one Credit Clear, it's just such a alien term to a newcomer who comes to this genre and doesn't even know where to begin. And if you try to tell him that, just don't use any continues when the game tells you so.
Yeah, don't press start when the game tells you so. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
I think you guys did a really good job with that, because ZeroRanger is unique in that it lets you continue, but only so much, and then it's saying, okay, you need to go back and work on some things.
You need to work on
system works.
Your life.
One of the
You need to think about things for a while. Come back.
One of the bigger pet peeves that both of us share in recent ports of cave games are the way continues are handled. Usually there's just free play, and
Yes.
and somehow a person who has never played these games should figure out that maybe I shouldn't push this button when I die.
Yeah, there was some kind of ruckus about like game reviewers giving like something like Mushihime-sama a bad score, saying this game was super easy. I beat it in 15 minutes. I don't get it. But you can't really blame the reviewer about that. Like, okay, he was very uneducated for something like a video game journalist, but the game just doesn't convey that, the game disc itself. And it was like, cave ports like tend to usually respect arcade perfectness to a T, which is kind of respectable, but it also like they do it in a way that compromises on the approachability. Like, here's all the modes, play everything at one go, no punishment from continuing other than you can't see the real ending or get to the TLB.
Yeah.
But like it makes it like a playground, which is fine by itself, but someone who's picking up the game at random and approaching it won't know that there's like just so much to learn about a game that is supposed to be like a pick up and play thing. Something has gone wrong when you expect a person to like look up guides to play a shoot 'em up that you will just like supposed to toss a coin in and play some.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think ZeroRanger, the way you guys implemented the continue system and everything, you can still stage select and stuff, so if you're getting murdered over and over in stage 4, you don't have to go back and play stage 1, 2, and 3 over and over. You can just jump right into stage 4. I think that was a really good idea as well.
Yeah, we like softened towards the end. I think during Raw Label we were like, okay, I don't want to program this to be any harder because this is just a demo, so you can just choose the stage where you died. But towards the end of ZeroRanger, we were like, this is a good thing, let's keep it.
Yeah. But and to balance it a bit, you programmed in the actual checkpoints in the game.
Yeah,
so
that was a thing that I really paid attention in 2015 when Eschatos and Judgment Silver Sword were released on Steam, and I replayed them for a bit, and like I had become more conscious about like shmups not being too hot for the general public, and I played Judgment Silver Sword and Credit Fed and still felt accomplished, because when you are continuing in like Judgment Silver Sword, it puts you back a checkpoint, so it means you actually have to learn that one part to pass. You can't like just resource mash yourself through. It pulls you back just a bit, yeah.
And I think what really works with ZeroRanger too is it's not like Gradius where you get checkpointed back, but you have no power-ups and you just get murdered over and over. So
yeah. Also, Gradius, like for one mistake, it throws you back to the checkpoint.
Yeah,
it's when you get an equivalent of basically a game over in ZeroRanger. That's when you're pulled back, but just a bit, so you can like you have to pay attention to that part.
Yeah, it's a really nice balance, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad it
like you say, you can't just resource mash all day long, but you can't. But you're not getting thrown into the same loop over and over and over for newer players either. So
yeah, it's something like immediately when I implemented it and tested out with my friends, like I have a lot of people that I can play test with that aren't too like hot about these games. So when Final Boss was like, it gives you 2 or 3 or 5 continues when you start it, and then you just like mash your way through the game halfway of stage 2, and then you die and are tossed into the checkpoint. People are like, okay, I don't get it, I'm not very good at this. But in like later ZeroRanger where you die in stage 1 and you are tossed back a bit, then they immediately get more serious, like, okay, I did something wrong, but I can try again. So
yeah,
they get way more invested in it, and it really did work out on like based on my initial observation of my friends.
Kind of eases that difficulty curve where in a lot of shmups for newer players they can get through stage 1 and 2 okay, but then stage 4 or stage 3 destroys them, and so forever they're stuck in stages 1, 2, and half of stage 3.
Clover. That was not a hot take. I really like that game.
There's a lot of shmups like that. Cave ones are especially like that.
Yeah. Crimson Clover is basically a cave game anyway.
Yeah. So This is actually a good time to talk about, you're mentioning the checkpoint system, and another thing that ZeroRanger has is a loop system where when you clear it, the first loop, you can go back and do the second loop. And I think a lot of people in the Discord and stuff have been talking about their feelings on whether loops are a good or bad thing. And I feel like ZeroRanger is a great example of how to do a second loop right. So I want to hear more about the way you guys approached designing the second loop of the game.
I don't quite remember when we decided to have a second loop. What do you have any memory about it, Ebro?
No, I don't remember a specific thing where we were just like loops are the hardest thing, but
maybe I think it was probably inspired a bit by Chorensa, where a second loop is by default a thing.
Yeah, I guess we can just that's a pretty good like history interpretation, I would say, because we don't actually remember when it came along.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely the thing that warranted the loop was the power-up system, because when you return to the stage 1 and you are all decked out, you have like all different tool set, then it's like actually a different game at that point. So it was like
exactly.
It felt like obligatory to include loops to like get everything out of the stages.
Yeah, and then we started to add other things to the loop so that it wouldn't be just a completely same enemy layout or patterns. That we wanted that there would be more differences, because personally I really believe that any gameplay system or mechanic can work if it's done well. So I wouldn't say that loops are will work for absolutely any game, but in this game it ultimately worked out for us.
Yeah, this game kind of begs for loops.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not really a shmup, but something about the power-up system almost reminds me of something like Super Metroid, where you get your power-ups and then you're excited to go back into previous areas where now you can just destroy things with your power-ups and stuff like that. It's kind of how it feels in ZeroRanger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we both like Metroid games, but
yeah, Zero Mission is our mistress.
Yeah, zeros all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but I was about to add that although we didn't really think about as a Metroidvania feature, many testers and people who tried the earlier versions were like, "Oh, this is sort of like Metroid," and then it suddenly dawned on us. Oh, well, yeah.
It was like really interesting observation from outside.
Yeah, that's funny how that kind of thing can happen, where people make connections you wouldn't even think of.
Yeah.
And you're mentioning accessibility to newer players and stuff, and so I wanted to talk to you more about kind of how the scoring system in ZeroRanger works, and what were your inspirations for how you put the scoring system together.
Ebbo first. Please take this bullet for me.
Well, this shouldn't really surprise you anymore, but it was pretty much just trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
In the very, very early version, the scoring system was related to the weapons in such way that you would get different amount of score for different weapons when you hit the enemies. And,
basically, the system was like, when you hit the enemy once, you get 1 point. So if you hit the enemy with a weapon that does 3 damage, you get like a third of the tick points.
Yeah, and if you have played and if you have played any Shmups, you should immediately be able to tell that that's not a very good system. So
it like straight up disencourages different weapon use.
Yeah, but I'm glad that we made that mistake, because it ultimately we learned from it that, hey, we want people to use these different weapons. So what's the best way to do it? And then after some more of trial and error, we ended up with a similar multiplayer system to Dodonpachi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but capped.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, so can you talk about your thinking behind, capping the multipliers?
Oh. Ebbo.
Well, I think that overall, when we were implementing the scoring system, we didn't want. Maybe I should emphasize this on this first by saying that scoring wasn't really a huge priority for us, although we definitely understood at that point that scoring is a very big replay value for many of the players, and the reason why people still play many of the games even today. But for us, the scoring was almost a secondary goal. That when we often design some enemies or bosses, and things ultimately just tended to work out, or maybe we noticed some particular behavior about the enemy pattern or something like that, and noticed, this is an interesting situation. I wonder if we could somehow use it in this scoring system more properly.
Yeah. Also, so it's a pretty interesting thing to maybe mention that the multiplayer scoring system was put in place in the 2012 version, sorry. In the 2014 version, when the mech was introduced, the overload system was introduced as well. So that was kind of a later addition. We didn't plan ahead for that one.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like the multiplier system was in there for quite a while. So when you guys decided to add the chaining and stuff, did you have to, I'm sure you must have had to gone back and rework some of the patterns and stuff and try and get that to chain and all that?
Actually, not much.
Yeah,
well, that's good.
I think it kind of magically worked out on itself.
Yeah, I think that it's because we designed the different weapons more like there is almost a toy-like element to them, that you have multiple uses for each weapon, and somehow they just ended up working very well with the existing stage design.
Yeah.
Of course, there were some minor adjustments where we noticed, okay, this point of the stage is pretty hard to change, so maybe we should make it a bit easier, because the point we didn't really want to make it feel like that in order to get the chain you have to plan everything perfectly.
Oh yeah, it's like Dodonpachi, where you got to be right there at the right time every time, otherwise that chain is gone.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, ZeroRanger isn't like completely free of that system, and I think if we designed the score system today, it might not be the entirely same, but like,
okay,
there's the cap, so it makes it like a lot more forgiving than say the Apache, and then there's the overload system, which is like an entirely different thing. That just kind of, we wanted to give some specialty to the mech form, so we were like spitballing different things, like maybe if it gives like 2 times the multiplier or something, but like stuff like that just makes you automatically always use the mech form, and that's just something I don't want to incentivize, like use this is the correct way to play. So I think it was Ebbo who came up with the what if the cap was double when you use the overload mech, and that was like the instant moment we knew like this will be the answer, because you will actually have to use the other weapons too to actually upkeep the chain.
That's a really cool way of solving the situation, because I know there's been a lot of shmups where they make one kind of oversight in their scoring system, and for players who are playing for score, they're basically forced to play a certain way just because of some oversight.
Yeah, I really wanted to avoid that, because I don't want to give toys that you shouldn't use.
Yeah, thankfully the weapons ended up being pretty balanced overall, at least for now. I'm not. Maybe in a few months, someone will completely break down the different score routes and sees how which one is the best one to for each situation, but I think that we strike a pretty good balance overall, even though we really didn't stress too much about it in the.
Mm-hmm.
I'm absolutely convinced there will be a balanced patch because now that there will be more players, they will just shatter the game.
Yeah.
And we have to clean up after them.
Yeah, that tends to happen. So
yeah. But it's relatively solid because we released Raw Label, which was like basically the finished game minus stage 4, and we had 2 like super player testers, Xerox and Sagar, on board that
awesome.
broke the version before that pretty hard.
Did they?
Them. Yeah, they did.
That's really cool.
And
that you had some super players helping you out.
Yeah, and that actually induced a last minute change that was a lot for the better. Like, you know how the multiplier, when it falls, it goes to half of the value and then rolls down.
Yeah.
Just before roll label, it used to be so that when the multiplier juice in the multiplier goes down, it goes straight back to 1. So actually going for like a 12.8 multiplier, it's like kind of low-key punishing because the juice will fall much faster and you are just way more likely to lose that multiplier and let it hit the absolute bottom.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So they were just keeping the multiplier intentionally low to maximize their points.
Or actually, they didn't, but they just suffered for losing it all the time and just actually getting less score. So that was no good.
Oh, I was going to ask you, you guys mentioned that, when you're creating these weapons, they're kind of fun toys for the player to use. For you guys, what were your personal favorite weapons that you guys put together?
I loved all. Well, I like all of them. But if I were to, the most, the ones I have tested the most are probably Sword and Backshot along with Charge. And our
I think Type C.
Yeah.
Yeah. Type B testing has mostly been done by Xerox and late in development Rue. However do you pronounce it? Yeah. And I'm also of the mindset that I love my children equally, but Type C sword is still the best. Because, I love them beam swords.
Well, I feel like that's a really signature element to ZeroRanger, for sure, is the beam sword.
Whoa. That's pretty interesting to know, because I would assume that people default to the drill.
That's my opinion. I mean, who knows, but that would be my opinion.
Your opinion is good, man. Keep it.
I'll keep it for now.
Whoa. Okay.
Everyone starts using the drill, I might have to go back on it, but... So, now that you guys have finally gotten ZeroRanger released, and I'm sure you're ready for a break, but I'm sure you're getting a lot of fan feedback that's already asking for what's next for ZeroRanger, so I gotta ask you, what are your guys' future plans for the game now that it's released?
Plans? No, actually, we do have plans. There's we want to make 2 more modes that are basically easy mode and hard mode. But they're going to be very different.
Okay, cool.
Think of the scope like Eschatos advanced mode different. You can if you know what that means.
Like a different arrangement altogether kind of thing?
Yeah, almost like that.
Okay, like a black label type thing, maybe.
Actually, yeah, I wouldn't say that. More different core systems. A little but pretty much the same stage layout. And, way more bullets for hard mode.
Nice.
So we're kind of... We did work on that, before the release, but...
We just realized we couldn't make it.
Yeah.
So we decided to focus our efforts on the normal mode.
Yeah, we thankfully realized it about hard mode very early on that this is gonna be an ordeal.
Yeah. I bet. I'm assuming you had to go in and really change a lot of elements of the game to implement the hard mode.
Yeah, it changes the entire base gameplay, so it was actually pretty fun to toy around with, prototype to hard mode.
I bet.
Was there something you wanted to add, Ebbo?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it took some time from the development when we tested around with the hard mode, but I think what we managed to develop in this time was kind of interesting. waiting already when we get to actually properly implement it into the whole game.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the system, or I don't know, the system that we have for hard mode now is pretty cool, I will say. But who knows, it might change entirely. I hope not, but
Yeah.
if it's for the better, we gotta swallow the bullet.
Yeah.
But yeah, also the work that we did on hard mode at the time had a very positive effect on like just the green-orange mode, that is the normal mode.
Mhm.
Because what we also needed to do, like the hard mode warranted making the bullets way more clear, because like there's a lot of them, and also there's a pickup item that we're also prototyping, so it had to be like way more immediately clear what is what and what is where.
Yeah.
So like those lessons learned in hard mode and those changes implemented in hard mode, some of them became like global changes for the normal mode as well.
Oh, so you went back and revised some of the bullets and stuff in normal mode then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Is the scoring similar in hard mode, or did you guys have to overhaul the scoring system too?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
You'll see. We'll see too.
So what is the easy mode like that you guys are working on? Or what's it planned to be like, I guess?
Think of the demo, but more.
Okay.
That's the current
Yeah,
plan.
we ended up really liking how the demo turned out, and we thought it would be a bit shame if nothing it would be salvageable for the final game.
Yeah.
And then we thought maybe we should expand this to the easy mode with some other minor additions.
Yeah, and because the old easy mode was like very underdeveloped. The whole focus of final boss, when it was called that, was the green-orange mode, and white vanilla and black onion, as they were called, were like afterthoughts compared to green-orange. They had like slightly different scoring systems and some dumb elements, and we wanted to expand on them a bit more. So white vanilla, the old easy mode, can easily be replaced with the new easier arrange mode. That is the demo plus, I would say.
Well, that's good. So you're able to use that work you've already done to kind of repurpose it.
Yeah, and it was also kind of a plan to, because we needed to make a easy mode fast because the release was approaching, looming on us, and I was like, let's just make it the demo, but more.
There you go.
Then we ran out of time to even do that.
Yeah.
But still like the idea, so we're gonna go with that.
And I'm sure you've also noticed, since your release, people are probably already requesting, console ports and console versions of ZeroRanger. What are your guys' thoughts about that?
We'd like it, but we can't promise anything yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like we are, you speak.
Obviously, we would like to have this game to be available as many people as possible. But then again, there's just two of us, and since Ebbo does mainly the heavy lifting with the coding, it's gonna take some time if we are going to consider console ports. And before even considering those, we would like to add some quality of life features to the game.
Yeah, like currently the gamepad features are like a disgrace, I would say.
What features are you mentioning?
I mean, I just did not have the time to add like proper gamepad remapping and so on, because the system that I have in place and the menu code are terrible to work with.
Oh.
So, I have to essentially relearn how I made the menus every time I look at them. So I'm just actually currently doing work on them, like implementing the settings saving in such a way that I don't have to cry blood every time I'm adding settings there. And it's going along pretty well. And the very next patch should have like a proper gamepad support for both D input and X input.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it's like it should have been there from the release, but what can you do?
I've spent some time with GameMaker trying to put in some control pad support, and I guess I can say that it's not as simple as it sounds.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, people assume it's like a 1, 2, 3, but it takes a bit.
Yeah, and especially if you're talking about GameMaker 8, the support was just like bad.
Yeah.
Had some native memory leaks for one, and that's like I don't need to say anymore even. Game Maker Studio does it well enough, but like
Yeah.
I gotta implement it.
I do have to say, recently I've been reviewing a lot of indie shmups, and I have to say that I was impressed, though, overall with ZeroRanger's UI and user interface and, menu navigation and settings on offer. I mean, yeah, Gamepad support's definitely going to be nice, but other than that, I really like how intuitive and user-friendly it is, because there's been some shmups I've been reviewing where I have to, like, exit out of the game and change the config file to map my buttons, and I'm like, this is ridiculous.
True Dojin experience.
Yeah.
Don't you
yes,
dare
exactly.
to even approach the ESC button, because it will just uninstall your game.
Well, we still have some of that jank in our game as well when it comes to ESC.
Yeah, it's like we have 2 pause menus essentially, which is like not something
the
you
enter and
should
the escape
do.
one.
Yeah, but it's like it's a clear Gust and Cave Story leftover that ESC menu we have, like straight out of lifted from Cave Story.
Yeah, well, I think it works well enough, but
yeah, I mean,
it sounds like you guys are wanting to unify them.
Yeah,
yeah.
Down the line.
Well, I do like that you guys offered Tate support too, because a lot of these shmups coming out now, some of them don't even have that.
Yeah, that's one part I gotta really thank Game Maker Studio 1 about, because implementing that in Game Maker 8 was just like so hard that
was it?
Yeah, I kind of gave up and just made it a different executable altogether, because that was like the best I could do, and it kind of worked, I guess. I haven't checked actually, but like Game Maker Studio, it was like with the kind of rendering that I had set up, it was just like draw the screen 90 degrees and it's done.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go in and change room views and all that
stuff.
stuff.
No, not at all. Game Maker,
that's nice.
That's one more thing about Game Maker Studio. It asks more of you as a developer, but it gives you way more control, especially in the terms of like rendering and graphics.
Yeah. And you mentioned it has really solid filtering and stuff like that. Shaders, I mean.
Yeah,
really
shaders.
Solid shaders.
The thing that it actually has shaders is like a big step up.
Yeah. I noticed you guys have Crt Scanline Shaders in there. Did you guys have to make those from scratch, or were they included in the Game Maker Studio?
That's actually just Game Maker drawing lines over the rendering field. That's like super unfancy, but I would like to include like better options there, but it's not high priority at the moment.
Yeah.
But quote unquote scan lines that I have implemented there are like super bare bones, just slap lines on the screen.
Well, that's sometimes what a lot of scanline generators are anyway, so.
Yep.
Well, awesome. And I guess one final note to talk about is I just wanted to come back to the subject of accessibility of this game, because there's just so many elements about it that I feel can bring in new players that make the game really special. And you guys mentioned that was a big focus recently then.
Yeah. There was this thought that was kind of just nagging me, like, this is a genre essentially about dodging dots. And I ended up not understanding how is it so niche when the core is just that. So I just wanted to like lube it up the best I could, just invite in new players.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the way you guys went around designing the game and just implementing a lot of the different features, it feels like that was a goal of your guys's, is to help new players in, rather than just throwing a PCB on a emulator and say, there you go, play, get murdered in stage 3 and play again. I don't know.
Yeah, one big shout out to username special word about that, special world on Shmups forum, that like hammered it into us that how accessible he felt the game already was. And that kind of was, at least to me, a wake-up call that like it's not far from being very like much more accessible to like what we had done for Raw Label was kind of accidental accessibility, so we just kind of doubled down on that.
And so I'm really hoping that you know, as this game gets more reviews, I'm hoping it gets the attention of not only the shmup community, who, you know, definitely loves it, but outsiders who don't really play shmups. Maybe the Undertale fan, you know, sees the skeleton boss and are like, oh, sick, and then they play ZeroRanger and start playing more shmups.
I just like that mental image. Whoa, sick! Let me just purchase this product.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Is there any final thoughts you guys want to talk about before we head out?
Ebbo.
Well, all I can think of is thanks everyone who already has bought and played the game and showed showed their support in any way. It really means the world to us.
Yeah, I agree. Pretty much, yeah. It's like, it's been, for one, a relief to release this game, and it's like been very heartwarming to see people like kind of take the game in the way we actually kind of intended it.
Yeah, and as a shmup fan, it's nice to see like a game that you've been anticipating and hearing about for a long time be released. Some of these shmups, you get so excited about them, and then they seem to be stuck in development for a really long time. So, big congrats for you guys for letting it, for releasing it.
Yeah, I wonder how many people just dubbed it us ever releasing it. Like, this is not a game that is actually happening, like Half-Life 3. And then Final Boss never came out. There's this new game called ZeroRanger. Yeah, I've actually seen some very loose forum posts that were like, oh, is this Final Boss? Like some people just dropped off the ride because
That's funny.
Yeah. But like, it was for the best.
Yeah, and I like the name a lot, and I think it, like you said, it's easy to find. It's really recognizable. So,
yeah.
Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. It's been awesome learning more about ZeroRanger.
Thanks for having us. It was a blast.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.